This recording focuses on Chapter 1 of Mindful Ethnography, Mind, Heart, and Activity for Transformative Social Research. The chapter is titled Conceptual Framings, Ethnography, Epistemology, Mindfulness, and Non-duality. Thanks again to Andrés Orellana for providing background music for this track, as he also did for the first one, which summarized some of the my main intentions in writing this book. Thanks to Elisa Noemi for the cover image on the book, and thanks to any listeners who have stumbled upon this. Thanks for the gift of your time in listening. It really is a gift, especially in an era in which so many people and groups seem to be competing for our attention, and where it's hard to sink into the kind of contemplative listening that I'm inviting you to do in these recordings. My intention in recording these thoughts is to offer another way into the material beyond just reading it. I include some meditative and contemplative practices that accompany each chapter and expand on these in this form. More and more in my own classes, I'm looking for material to enrich, accompany, or sometimes replace written texts. I'll read a few excerpts from each chapter in each recording. I'll summarize the key ideas and offer a little more of the story behind the words. I'll conclude each recording with a short guided meditation for ethnographers, offering ways to let the ideas settle through your mind and your heart, and then take them out into your work in the world. The first chapter of this book was absolutely the hardest one to write. It's the headiest one, the one most steeped in readings, theories, ideas, including ones that are very difficult to capture in words. I address some important epistemological, axiological, and ontological questions that arise in the doing of research in general and ethnography in particular. I also give recognition to a wealth of wisdom traditions from around the world and across history, asking what these non-dualistic orientations offer to ethnography. I ask what ethnography offers to knowledge claims, especially in the strange post-truth era we seem to be living. I consider what mindful ethnography offers to debates about subjectivity and objectivity in research and the relationship of self and other that is central to all research and to ethnography in particular. It's also central to just living life on this planet. I take on questions of reflexivity, though I suggest that reflectivity may be the more apt term, as we learn not to react to, but to put a pause and reflect on our positionalities in dynamic ways. I like to say we need to attune the instrument of our being. In ethnography, we are the instruments of our research. As we bring our eyes, ears, and all our senses, as well as our minds, hearts, lived experiences, and histories of being in the world, to our ethnographic work, using these experiences and using the instrument of our being to try to understand how others experience the world. I wrote and rewrote this chapter many times, making many excisions and relegating other material to footnotes, so as to keep myself from going down the rabbit's hole of epistemological debates that will never be settled by anything I have to say. But mostly, I did not want this book to get weighed down on the mind side of the triad of mind, heart, and activity. The heart of the chapter centers on this matter of non-duality, which is really very difficult to capture in words. In fact, there's a tremendous contradiction in contrasting duality and non-duality, or trying to explain awe, connectedness, wonder in a few words in a chapter. I'll read a bit about this sticking point and then summarize what I believe this suggests for ethnography. So here's from the book. At the core of debates about subjectivity and objectivity that reign in social science research is the notion that there is an objective reality that can be separated from our subjective views of it, and thus that we can know. The entire enterprise of modern Western scientific research is, arguably, premised on this assumption. This is a dualistic perspective, one that dichotomizes subjectivity and objectivity, self and other, the knower and the known. Most of us have deeply internalized the idea that these things are or can be separated, even if we sometimes entertain the idea that the division is illusory. Under modernity and the rise of European dominance over the intellectual world, many other dualisms became marked and entrenched in our thinking and naturalized. The separation of humans from animals, living creatures from the earth, mind from heart, intellect from emotions, body from brain. The Cartesian divide, the distinction between mind and body, intellect and spirit, or head and heart, that was reinforced and developed in the European Enlightenment, did not just split the mind from the body, it elevated rational, linear, and logocentric mind processes, and it denigrated intuitive, left-brained, non-rational, or emotional dimensions of human understanding. Transcending this divide does not mean abandoning mind-driven ways of knowing and replacing them with intuition, but rather rebalancing binaries that have gone awry. This book is an attempt to do just that, and I join with many others who also seek a new way forward. This is not just an epistemological or philosophical point. Dualistic thinking arguably is at the root of much suffering in the world. It is the belief that there is a separation between ourselves and others, between ourselves and the world, that alienates us from the world and from each other and sets us into continual wars between those we view as us and those we view as them. The compulsion to name these differences may keep us from seeing how differences are sustained by the push-pull of dualistic thinking and the larger wholes of which they are part. This in turn may get in the way of more profoundly decolonizing our minds and our hearts and the social worlds that we construct. What does this suggest for ethnography? A fully non-dualistic approach may undermine the pursuit of social analysis. It might lead us to remove ourselves from the world, sit in bliss, and contemplate our oneness. If we can never know anything except perhaps our own consciousness, why should we try to understand the world outside our minds? Our attempts to illuminate, narrate, or tame social life in ethnographic texts could, arguably, only contribute to obscuring more profound levels of reality, ones that transcend the categories that ethnography aims to identify and analyze. But we live and move in a dualistic world. And within that world, there is much injustice and tremendous suffering. What is our responsibility in the face of inequity? As researchers concerned with social transformation, how can we contribute to understanding both the causes and the consequences of that suffering, and how can we work toward its alleviation? Socially transformative research of a mindful bent may require sitting with paradoxes. The differences that exist within this world are socially constructed, but they are lived as real with tremendous impact. We can study the world as it is, identifying differences that make a difference and showing how they operate in the world, even as we imagine how these differences could be made to matter differently or not at all in a different setting, place, or time. So with this in mind, I offer a few guidelines for ethnographers who aim for their work to be both mindful and socially transformative. I then will give flesh to this discussion in the next chapter as I take these ideas into field work. So here are my suggestions. First, see categories as relational, and consider what the labels we use reveal about those relationships. 2, examine categories within their local systems. How are the meanings of these categories, especially dualities of good, bad, right, wrong, normal, atypical, constructed? How do dualities sustain each other within local systems? 3. Imagine how these constructions, these dualities, these relationships could be otherwise. Imagining possibilities that do not exist yet is not easy at all, but sometimes imagining them is the first step to bringing them into being. 4. See into, through, and beyond labels. When we place a label on something, we define it not just by what we presume it to be, but in relation to what it's not. We can become more conscious of the labels we use to describe what we see in the field, and we can consider what the labels reveal about our own ways of viewing the world, the dominant categories of our culture, and the relationships between things. All labels are fraught within systems of oppression and histories of power relation. The act of fixing things with labels may keep us from seeing them more fully or looking more deeply into them. So we can see into, through, and beyond labels. 5. Be aware of comparisons. When we see something as loud or bright or beautiful, what implicit comparisons undergird our thinking? 6. Examine how differences came to be. What are the processes through which dualisms arise? 7. Identify where differences fall away. This reminds us that socially constructed differences are not fixed, solid, and enduring, and this can point to possibilities we might not otherwise see. 7, and this is really at the heart of non-duality, seek connection and commonality. Identifying interconnection is not about ignoring differences that matter in the social world, but it is about seeing more clearly what links us in what Thich Nhat Hanh refers to as our interbeingness. 9. Identify obstacles to connection. This is where power enters in. We can become more aware of the obstacles so we can remove them. 10. Nurture the seeds of possibility. It's easy to get lost in critique. It is harder to see potential and possibility. But with practice, we can get better at nurturing the seeds of possibility. 11. See with compassion. By holding our own egos a little more lightly, we can move past limiting perspectives and find points of connection with people and ideas that we might otherwise set ourselves in opposition to. It helps if we listen with our hearts. That's number 12. This involves listening to others as we might wish them to listen to us. Listening for the good. Listening to what's under their words, or going over the words sometimes, because sometimes words get us trapped. 13. Attend to our thoughts and feelings. Both are important. And 14. Finally, be gentle. The open mind and heart that I'm calling for is not easy to sustain and to bring consistently into our work. Contemplative practices encourage us to be gentle with ourselves and with others as we fall short of our own ideals. So let's go on with the meditation. Let's pause. Settle in wherever you are. Maybe you're driving, in which case perhaps you should pull over before you continue. Perhaps you've been doing things as you listen, grounded in activity in the world. But for this, why don't you settle into a chair, somewhere comfortable. Feel your bottom on the chair, your feet on the ground, your hands resting lightly, your shoulders relaxed, chin slightly tucked in, back straight, relaxing, closing your eyes, turning off all that input from the external world, sights, sounds, if you can. Just relax for a minute. Ground your feet on the earth or on the floor above the earth, and remind yourself of the histories of people that have come before you, in this geographical space, indigenous people, wherever you are, whoever has lived in this space before you, in this building, in this house, on this land. Also your spiritual and intellectual ancestors who have generated so many ideas that percolated in and through this chapter and handed down from generation to generation, sometimes in academic texts, sometimes in spiritual texts, sometimes in spoken word, or just ideas that have been transmitted and transmuted through the processes of idea circulation. Let them all settle in. Relax. Listen to the music. Breathe. Hear how the music rises and falls with no words. Let that side of your brain take over for a minute before we return to the verbal, to the scholarly, to the logocentric work that we do so well in academia. So let the ideas I have raised swim around on the movie screen of your mind. Just see what rises and falls away. Did you have any strong reactions to any of the words or ideas I used? Did you find yourself resisting? Was there anything that annoyed you? Made you mad? Or that your thinking mind disagreed with? Maybe you wanted to argue back, make a counterpoint, resist. Can you sit with that discomfort right now? Even lean into it? You don't need to settle it, just notice. Where did you feel resistance? How about resonance? Was there anything I said or read that animated or excited you? That connected with your own thoughts, feelings, prior histories, other things you've heard or read or felt or done? What resonates for you right now? As you listen to the music and let the words and ideas we've just played or danced with swim around inside. Notice the resonance or the resistance, how it ebbs and flows. Where does it sit in your body? Where has it settled now? When you're ready, open your eyes. Take in where you are now. Maybe glance down at that earth that grounds you and glance up too. It's good to connect with the earth, but it's also good to connect with the sky and the universe and remember how small we are in the grand scheme of things and how so many of the things we think are important really aren't. So connect with the ground, connect with the universe, connect with your heart, connect with your mind, connect with your histories of experiences in the world, your commitments, what you want to take from this out into your own work. It might be helpful now to journal some of your thoughts. You could voice record a verbal response, or write one with pen on paper, or type one. Or try drawing some of your ideas in a visual form. Don't try to compose a carefully structured analysis. You can do that another time. Just attend to the thoughts and feelings that have surfaced for you and see where they take you or where they settle. This is not a journey to be rushed, not a book to be checked off as read. And as in life, there is no test at the end. I hope that you will find your own path that balances mind, heart, and activity in a way that feels right for you. Thank you again for listening to this summary and reflections on Chapter 1 of Mindful Ethnography, Mind, Heart, and Activity for Transformative Social Research.